What does the Bible have to say about DNA? Well, maybe more than you think. L.A. Marzulli is here to talk about exactly that. You know, the story of the Bible really can be encapsulated in DNA, going all the way back to the original couple, the various ways in which Satan attempted to corrupt human DNA. Sure. And you're right on top of that story. Welcome to Prophecy Watchers.
Great to
LA.
be here, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about that
Sure.
for a minute. And your research has taken you into a number of strange places when it comes to DNA.
Interestingly enough, this goes back into our On the Trail of the Nephilim 1, On the Trail of the Nephilim 2, Watchers 6, and all these products, I believe, are in the Prophecy Watchers bookstore. And when we were down in Peru a number of years ago, about 3 years ago, the reason why I went down there and took a team of people down there was because of these greatly elongated skulls that were there. And they seemed to be anomalous. And what I mean by that, and there's this controversy, which by the way has been raging in the scientific community since they first discovered these things 150 years ago. And some people maintain that the skulls are elongated through natural means. In other words, cranial deformation, where you take an infant, you wrap the infant, you place material, and you shape the infant's head. And you do that between about 18 months and 3 years, and you can create a cone head. We understand that. We get that. Cranial deformation was definitely practiced. I understand that. We're maintaining that not all of the skulls have been done that way, have been cradle headboarded, artificial deformation. We think some of it is actually genetic. And that's why we're on the trail. That's why we're constantly going back and forth to Peru, getting samples and looking at to see if if it's genetic, then we should see some kind of marker in the DNA. Unfortunately, as we're sitting here now, we have not been able to sequence the entire genome. We have got very interesting DNA evidence, which I believe is groundbreaking, based on multiple samples that we were able to take out legally from Peru.
And the question has always haunted me about elongated skulls versus abnormally elongated skulls, the practice of binding the skull in the cradle to produce an elongated skull. Why would you do that?
Why wake up on a Monday morning and go, hey, son, we're going to make you a cone head today? I mean, what's the point? What are they trying to emulate? Why is it global?
Yeah.
Why is it elongated? And I believe, my hypothesis has been from the get-go, that Nephilim tribes were in the Levant, in the nation of Israel, the promised land. When Joshua and Caleb comes in about 3,500 years ago, there was a diaspora of these Nephilim tribes. Why? Because they were being wiped out. And the God of the Bible states, wipe them all out, men, women, children, burn the animals, kill everything, burn everything. That's genocide, unless we're looking at something else.
And let me set the stage a little bit. I have my Bible open to Genesis 14 here. And there are 4 Gentile kings who come into the promised land, and they attack Abraham, as he was known at that time, Abram, and they had a battle. But there's another thing in the whole narrative of this battle. In verse 5 of Genesis 14, and in the 14th year came Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him. Now, those are the 4 Gentile kings that came up against Abram. But get this. They smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emims in Shaveh Kiriatim. Well, what are those 3 giant tribes doing there? And these are only 3 of a number of other giant tribes that are mentioned. What are they doing in the mix? And by the way, why is there such an urgency to wipe out these tribes, which there is, as you read on in Genesis 14, 15, 16?
I believe this hails back to Genesis 3 in the biblical prophetic narrative, when it states, when the Most High God is in the garden, and you brought this to light in the Nephilim Mounds Conference, and it's a great presentation, that when the God of the Bible is in the garden. Adam and Eve are over here, the serpent's over here. And the God of the Bible, El Elyon, the Most High God, states, the seed of the serpent will be at enmity, at war with the seed of the woman. The seed of the woman becomes Messiah. We know that. Eventually becomes Messiah. The seed of the serpent is sperma. I mean, it's seed. It's all about the seed, which was the title of your presentation. All about the seed. And unless we come to an understanding of this ongoing seed war, we're left hopelessly without a clue as to the rest of the biblical prophetic narrative, because it is all about the seed. The kingdom of the serpent is trying to create man in his own image. And what we see with those three kings that are mentioned, the Raphaim, the Zanzumim, and the Emims, those, in my opinion, are Nephilim. They are hybrid entities. They are part fallen angel, part human. And they may even be, in some sense, immortal. In other words, they can be killed, yes, so they're not immortal like the angels, but they're certainly not, their lifespan may be far greater than humans. We don't know. That's conjecture on my part, and I'm the first to admit it. But something is going on where we see that judgment come down, and they go after these guys, and of course, we know the end of the story.
So to go back a bit, we believe in the creation of Adam and Eve by God. We believe that they sinned. We believe that because of their sin, the doors of this world were open to satanic attack before the flood. And the pre-flood earth became so corrupted, it had to be destroyed. But after the flood, the whole battle resumes, and it resumes with the tainted DNA that somehow came either across the flood or was reintroduced after the flood. And you have these giant tribes. Now, what do the giants look like? There's one tribe called the Anakim, for example, the long-necked ones. There is a tribe called the Zamzumim. And apparently they had a different genome. They looked different. Their names reveal a different physiognomy. In other words, not only are they big, but these various tribes are different looking, meaning that they have a different genome. And so this is a fascinating story to me. Why would God allow this? Why would God then charge the Israelites later on, get rid of all those giants around at the time of David? Which then brings us to where you were talking about the exodus of giants.
Well, I think it's a move, counter move between the fallen cherub and the Most High God all throughout Scripture. And the counter move, of course, or the move from the fallen cherub is to basically pollute the human genome. Again, he's trying to create, in my opinion, man in his own image, which is why you've got the denotation of these different tribes, like the Zanzumim, the Emims, the Anakim. What's interesting, there was an archaeologist who's part of our team. His name is Rick Woodward, and he posited that, which is really interesting, and I'll just show you a picture here. These are two Arroyo skulls here, and this skull here is a normal human skull. And you can see this area right here where the Foramen Magnum is, right here. Here's the Foramen Magnum. It's completely different in the Arroyo skulls than a normal human being. And the whole point of this is Rick Woodward's research, and in my opinion, it's very, very telling, because the Foramen Magnum is of a different shape. It's more circular and much smaller than a normal human being. So there's a forensic artist, her name is Marcia Moore, and we gave her this information about the position of the Foramen Magnum. Not only is it smaller, but it's located further back towards the occipital plate, towards the rear of the skull. A normal human skull, where our vertebrae comes up with the spinal column, attaches somewhere in the center of our skull. That balances everything, and fearfully and wonderfully made. And our spinal columns are actually curved slightly, especially in the neck area. These skulls are completely different because of where the Foramen Magnum is positioned in the rear of the skull. And Gary, what's interesting about this, you can't move the Foramen Magnum if you cradle board a child.
That's true.
You can't do that. And this is Marcia Moore, and she has created this incredible shot, and you can see it here for yourself. The neck is greatly elongated here. And what's interesting about this, the word Anakim, which is one of the Nephilim giants that we read about in the biblical prophetic narrative, the word Anakim can be translated long necks. She had no idea of what that meant. And after she showed this to me, I'd sort of chuckle to myself and I say, look, I'm not trying to put one up on you, but are you aware that one of the Nephilim tribes stated in the biblical prophetic narrative is the Anakim, and the Anakim means long necks? I find that incredible.
The long-necked ones. And there are different names denoting different physiognomies and different features. For example, there are the noisy ones, there are the weak ones, there are the tall, skinny ones. In other words, their names, their different tribal names, suggest different physiognomies. Now, back to the binding of infant skulls to make them appear longer. A lot of the tribes of South America did this routinely. And it's your contention that they got the idea from those beings whom they considered their superiors, the giants, which had elongated skulls. And you've got some pretty good evidence for that.
This is a skull that we had access to in Oregon. We call it the La Arroyo Skull. And you'll notice something right here. Notice how greatly elongated it is. Notice this area right in here where the forehead is. If you look at my forehead, this is right above the brow ridge. I have a forehead here. There is no forehead on this particular skull. Here's the brow ridge right here. That skull goes back basically at a 45-degree angle, and it's greatly, greatly elongated. It is our contention, and again, I've shown this particular skull and pictures of it to medical doctors every place I go. And they all look at this and go, you can't manipulate the skull that way. You can't do it. And then we have the position of the Foramen Magnum, which is in the rear of the skull. We maintain our hypothesis is, and it's not proven yet, which is why it's a hypothesis, scientific method, that these skulls are the result of genetic manipulation by an outside agency that may or may not be human. And that's, so if that's the case, when we get DNA evidence, we should begin to see something that doesn't line up with the scientific community. And in my opinion, we have found that.
God created human beings in his own image and likeness. But then along came others who polluted the human genome, and their image and likeness was a deviant, if you will. It's fascinating to me, as you were talking, I think of the priesthood of Babylon, the priesthood of Egypt. The priests used to wear these long, elongated headdresses that made their skulls look elongated. And you ask yourself, why would they want to do that?
Why would they want to do that?
And the answer seems kind of obvious. If they regarded these beings as superior. So this brings us now to a juncture. What are you doing right now? Your research is taking you into what area?
Well, what we were able to do from this skull here, and I just want to show you something. Take a look at the difference between this skull right here, which is the elongated skull from Peru, and this skull, which is a normal human skull. I mean, there is a disparity between them.
There really
is a disparity between these two skulls. This skull here, the La Arroyo skull, we were able to get DNA. What I mean by that, we were able to go in and extract powder from it. It's in a private collection in Oregon. It has been in the family literally for decades. We flew up to Oregon. We met with the gentleman who owns this particular artifact. He allowed us to get powder out of it. Now, this skull had been jostled in a box with other artifacts, other skulls, including Native American. So when we did the testing on it, and by the way, the full report of the testing is in the appendix of the book. When you go back, you can actually see all the DNA testing from several different labs that we actually employed to get the evidence tested. So we were able to take the powder from the La Arroyo skull. And what is incredible about this, Gary, is this skull, we carbon-14 dated, it's about 800 years old. That's not that old, only 800 years, which means this ties back into the Native American oral tradition that giants were in the land. What's incredible is the DNA evidence pointed from the powder that the haplogroup, which comes from the mitochondrial DNA, which comes from the female line, shows an origin in this particular skull, specifically in Turkey, Syria, and Mesopotamia. That is the Middle East. Why is this so important? Why did we about fall off of our chairs when we heard this? Because it goes against the existing Darwinian paradigm, which states unequivocally that the Americas, both North, Central, and South America, were peopled by people coming over from the Beringian land bridge. The Bering Strait was a land bridge. They came over from Asia and trickled down into the Americas. What we have discovered completely flies against that theory. It points to a European/Middle Eastern origin of these Paracas people, which fits our hypotheses exactly. And that excites us like crazy.
Indeed. Now, you're going up directly against an establishment theory.
Sure.
The Darwinian evolutionary model essentially says that we elevated ourselves from the apes and became a consistent humanoid end product, and that we're evolving upward even as we speak into the next level, I suppose. So their theory of upward evolution would not want to recognize the fact that there are competing genetic models, and that in fact there were real giants, and that in fact they may have a different DNA base. And so you're basically fighting the establishment. And at this point, I want you to tell us the very, very interesting story of the museum at Catalina Island. You live on the West Coast, not far from Catalina.
Exactly.
And you had an amazing series of events connected with a museum there.
Basically what happened was a number of years ago, and this is all in On the Trail of the Nephilim Volume 2, but there's an author who wrote a book called Mysterious Catalina. His name is Jim Watson. I'm reading the book, and I turn to a chapter about this sort of enigmatic primitive archaeologist, 1919 and 1921. He's doing these archaeological digs on the Channel Islands, which run from Santa Barbara down to San Diego. And he's out there and he's digging up all this stuff. And in some ways, he's a little more than a grave robber. Okay, I get that. A lot of Native American artifacts. I understand that. That's somebody's uncle. I get it. And they should be repatriated. They should be reburied. Yeah. I understand that. But there was a mention in this little chapter in Watson's book, Mysterious Catalina, about Ralph Glidden, who's the name of the archaeologist, uncovering 9-footers. And I just went, wow, this is amazing. So I called Watson. We had a meal together. And in the course of our conversation, I asked him, well, where did you get this information? He said, well, L.A. Are you aware that the curator of the museum, John Borgina, just discovered this missing cache of Ralph Glidden? It was up in the attic, and he discovered this thing. And archaeologists have been out there, and there's pictures and journals. Well, I found about, so I immediately called the Catalina Island Museum, and after 8 months of negotiation and a $1,000 contribution, I was able to go out to the island. What I found there was absolutely astounding, and I just want to show you, just give you an idea of some pictures here. This was one of the first pictures I actually discovered, and this is out in the Catalina Island Museum. It's this one right here. And by the way, when I got there, everything was already sanitized. See this picture right here? This is what I got. I got museum boxes taken out of a vault. Inside the museum box is the manila folder, and everything's cataloged. Everything's been numbered and listed, and here it is. But I found this photograph. This here is the real photograph. It is not touched up in any way. It is not photoshopped. Notice the elongated skull here.
Yes.
That's not supposed to be there. Notice the elongated skull in the child here. That's not supposed to be here. And I called the curator of the museum over, and he was absolutely taken aback by what he was looking at. But there was no way to really establish the height of this thing. And there was a donut stone that you can see in the picture, but there's no way to calculate the height. A little later on, and I was there for 10 hours in the archives, poring over everything. This is what being on the trail is about. Getting your hands dirty, going into the archives, but also going out into the field like we do and uncovering as much as we possibly can. This is the photograph that changed everything. This is the Ralph Glidden photograph. And you'll notice Glidden standing here in a recently excavated tomb, and in front of him is a very large figure. And Gary, it was you, and I tip my hat, who told me there are people that can take this photograph, and based on the height of Ralph Glidden, which we knew was 5'8", they can extrapolate the size of the skeleton. Well, we did that to cut to the chase, and what we discovered was the skeleton was basically just shy of 9 feet in height. Mm-hmm. And of course, that shouldn't be there. And by the way, 3 different researchers, and there was no collusion between any of them, had the photograph. They knew the height of Ralph Glidden. They used different techniques. They all arrived at the same conclusion, that this giant was just under 9 feet. Okay. So we go with that. It's on the History Channel's In Search of a Lost Giants. I appear on that. I give all the evidence. Of course, they spin it back into the Darwinian evolution. which that's what they were. It's their show; they can do what they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Richard Shaw and I go back there because we want to do sort of a recap on the Catalina Island Museum, and we're going there to shoot there. And the Ralph Glidden collection exhibit has been reduced to one room. So we turn the corner, and there in front of us is this picture, and I just want to show it to you. And our jaws absolutely fell to the ground. Here's what we saw when we turned the corner. What we saw was the picture blown up. The picture I had was 5x7. This thing's blown up probably 18 inches wide by a foot tall. But what it did, and underneath it is this whole diatribe about how Glidden was little more than a grave robber. It's basically a hit piece on Glidden. This is what we did. Here's the picture of Ralph Glidden above, and Richard Shaw is holding up my book, On the Trail of a Nephilim, Volume 2. What's missing is the giant, which was deliberately cropped out of the picture. And
okay, and why would they do that?
Why would they do that? Because what it does, in my opinion, it points back to the veracity of the biblical prophetic narrative, which states, we've talked about this, the whole idea of Genesis 3, the seed of a serpent and the seed of the woman. It points back to the veracity of a supernatural world, a supernatural God, and this rails against the Darwinian paradigm. You can't have both in Darwinism.
You're in sort of a race right now.
Yeah.
A race to get the evidence before it's destroyed. And by the way, it's being systematically destroyed.
Sure it is.
You could probably write a book on the number of historical artifacts that have been whisked out of sight, destroyed, burned, locked up in safes and vaults. There is a systematic effort to eliminate your hypothesis, which puts pressure on you, I must say.
No, there is. And what's interesting about this is we've got newspaper article after newspaper article from the 20th century stating that giant bones were recovered, and the Smithsonian came and collected the bones and never seen again. Giant bones were discovered over here, the bones of a 9-foot skeleton, and the Smithsonian came and took them up. We never get to see them. And what's amazing about this, and I'll hold it up again so you can see it. By the way, we're talking about Nephilim Hybrids book here. It's also in Watchers 10. I mean, there it is. It's like glaring at you. And why would they go out of their way to deliberately crop the picture? Because it's damage control. In my opinion, and this is, I'm entitled to it, I hope, but in my opinion, this is what's called damage control. And because it went viral, because it was on the History Channel, because I've appeared on numerous publications, including right here on Prophecy Watchers, they're backpedaling. And what this implies, get this, what this picture implies is that L.A. Marzulli created the photograph. That's what they're saying. That somehow, that they're not implying that, they're not writing it, no one's stating that, but immediately it causes doubt in the viewer's mind. Well, maybe L.A. just created this photograph because he wants to, prove his hypotheses. Nonsense.
Well, let's face it, the world system, and we who study the Bible and preach the word often use that term, the world system, to apply to the satanic world system. The world system has an agenda of its own, and it's a deeply differing system. It abhors Christianity, which is based upon the idea that God created man in his own image and likeness, and that the seed of the woman would eventually give birth to the Lord Jesus Christ, that we would be resurrected in the image of God. That whole story has to be derailed somehow. And this is the way, or one of the ways they've chosen to do it. So when you say you're on the trail of the Nephilim, you're really on the trail of biblical truth.
When I'm on the trail, what we are trying to do, again, it points back to the veracity of the biblical prophetic narrative. There is a supernatural. There is a God. He sent his son for the remission of sins. By believing in him, we can have eternal life. That's what we're pointing back to. It's real, hardcore physical evidence that something is going on, and we are not being told the truth. We're not. It's been obfuscated. It's been hid. It's been managed. There's a managed agenda, which is on a global level. I went down into Peru in the museum there. The first thing I saw as I turned the corner, there's that little chimpanzee which just decides to stand up, and the whole evolution to modern man, just magically appears, and it's in every
Yeah.
museum. The Darwinian paradigm is sacrosanct in both the scientific community and academia. And this is why Christians really need to get on board with this, because it points back to a creator God. Hallelujah.
Now, I suggest that if you don't have your copy already, get a copy of L.A. Marzulli's Nephilim Hybrids. And at this point, you will note that on the cover of this is a little demon in a jar of formaldehyde. We're going to send you this as well. It's called The Anatomy of a Hoax. Mm-hmm. The little creature on the front cover, after very deep examination, turned out to be a total fraud. And the DVD explains, in Marzulli's own words, his own presentation, exactly how he got fooled and exactly what this hoaxer was trying to do. Mm-hmm. And so Nephilim Hybrids for $19.95 plus the free Anatomy of a Hoax. It's a 40-minute DVD. Put these together and you've got a lot of information. By the way, when you buy anything from our Prophecy Watchers bookstore, you always get a free copy of the current issue of The Prophecy Watcher. This one happens to be about the reason for the rapture, but it's also got a lot of other articles in it as well. The Nephilim Hybrids package, by the way, which we're offering for $39.90, includes the book, Watchers 10, your latest DVD, the free Anatomy of a Hoax, and the free magazine. All that for $39.90. And you'll be able to keep up with Marzulli's studies, his adventures. By the way, you haven't quit. You're off on another...
We are on the trail.
We can't talk about
what we're doing, but we're on the trail.
And I mean, he can't talk about it.
No, he can't. Not a word.
I wish you could. He told me where he's going. I can't tell you either. But it's fascinating. I can't wait to see what you find there.
Yeah.
And it looks like you're going to find something really interesting.
I think so.
No hints.
We'll see. Don't know yet.
No hints.
No hints.
A final thought. I think you expressed it greatly when you talked about the gospel, the biblical story of creation. Didn't involve evolution.
No.
Do you have a final thought in the concluding minute or so?
I just think we're in a window of time where the battle is raging all around us, that we are certainly in a post-Christian era, that evil is called good and good is called evil. I've never seen anything like it. I think we're heading towards that time of Jacob's trouble called the tribulation. I don't believe that the church is about to go through it. I know my blessed hope is to be raptured, to be caught up, and to see the one whom I serve. And that's what all this is really about. It all points back to the coming King, to the return of our King. And that's exciting.
I couldn't agree with you more. May the Lord bless you and
Likewise,
yours.
Gary.
May the Lord bless your studies, your travels, keep you safe, and we'll be praying for you. Wish I could tell people where you're going. No, that comes later. You know, it's an amazing time in which we live. Keep studying the Bible. Keep studying prophecy. Of course, that's what we do right here at Prophecy Watchers. So keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.